To welcome you here. If you're here, I'm going to assume it's because you're interested in learning more about the current and future state of JavaScript and learning about the state of the Hack Reactor at Galvanize software engineering program. And if that's the case, you're in the right place. I'm going to kick this off by introducing you, if you don't know him already, to Sean Dross, founder at Hack Reactor and now Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at Galvanize.
Thanks, Caroline. Wait, everybody, hold on. We really need to double up on that applause for Laurie Voss, co-founder of NPM and one of the all-time favorite speakers of Hack Reactor by student vote. Everybody, please give it up. Thank you, Laurie, for joining us. So happy to have you here. Really.
Thank you very much.
Really, somebody was asking me earlier today if I was excited to talk, and I was like, it's actually just normally I'm not. I don't normally like talking very much. But I'm just so excited to talk about where JavaScript is at with you for the next half an hour.
No problem. That is pretty much what I spend my entire life thinking about these days, so very happy to talk about it for basically infinity time.
So for those of you who aren't already familiar with this little crucial bit of background, NPM, the company that Laurie co-founded and now works at, is kind of the JavaScript company, arguably the only reason and the sole sustaining reason that JavaScript has ever existed. No, I'm exaggerating, but anyway, it's kind of like one of those crucial infrastructure companies within the JavaScript world. So he sure does know a lot of things. Let's try and pump as much information as we can out of his brain in the next little bit. Yeah, so topic tonight is the state of JavaScript. I'd say it's pretty good.
Well, it's certainly in a state of change. And I think that's the constant of like web development in general and JavaScript in particular is every so often like this same argument erupts on social media about how kids these days aren't learning the fundamentals. And I'm like, I have been doing web development for 25 years now, and I'm like, I'm positive I don't know what the fundamentals are. Like, because when I started, the fundamentals were like, there was no CSS, there was no JavaScript. The fundamentals were like, you need to write your own HTTP parser in C. Otherwise, you're not a real programmer. And these days, everyone is like, yes, we do all of that with the serverless now. And everyone's writing React apps, but they don't know the fundamentals of React. And I'm like, you're 15 levels up the stack.
What does this mean? None of us are like writing TCP code, so let's just kind of get over it. So a lot of things happen. Yes, big state of flux. There's a lot. Gosh, there's just so much to cover. We're not even going to get to the half of it in a half an hour. There's couple of recent things. A couple of like big pieces of the equation of like what's the state of JavaScript. I'm just going to list a couple. You can throw a couple in. We've got most of the web has been rewritten over the course of the last 5 to 10 years to be responsive apps rather than being sort of like HTML and CSS with a little layer of JavaScript paint. Used to be you would click something and then the whole page would disappear and then a new page would load, and now JavaScript does all that in the background and kind of like, and that's the rise of the front-end app and React and all of those other pieces. And of course, V8 was another major development that got ripped out and started. People started using it on the back end and totally outside of the web, and that's where Node came from, which is the N in NPM. For those of you who, what else is going on in JavaScript these days?
So I think pointing to V8 as the seminal moment in the sort of birth of modern JavaScript is probably correct. It was like JavaScript was just like you said, like a layer of paint, and then Google was like, we cannot serve ads fast enough. Like, this is a real problem. the ads are really slow, and
It's time to innovate.
This is a problem because it's our whole job. And so they got this weird guy in Norway, I think, or Sweden possibly, I can't remember, like this guy who was primarily just really good at math. And they were like, you are going to write a compiler for JavaScript, and it needs to be able to compile JavaScript in the 0.1 seconds that it takes us to download that JavaScript. You need to be able to compile it at the same speed that it's coming down from the internet so that it's faster than it's ever been. And he was like, fine, whatever, I'm crazy and I'm good at math.
My favorite part of this story, which I might have made up, is that he did it in a cabin with no internet.
That's true. That is true. That is a
You
true
have
fact.
to be kidding me. That's
Because
true?
math people, like, the best way to be good at math is to have nothing to do and nothing to do it with. Because then you're just, like, in your head doing math. Yeah, so you're right. He wrote it, not all of it, obviously, but a lot of it in his, like, internetless cabin in the middle of Norway, I think. But as the result, like, you could do, like, orders of magnitude more complicated JavaScript because it was hundreds of times faster than it used to be. And so people began to become interested in JavaScript as a language rather than JavaScript as, like, this thing that I need to do in order to be able to serve the ads.
And, you know, there was an interesting period. One of the things I'm most curious to hear your perspective on is, like, what you think about JavaScript and Node outside of the browser these days. I mean, there was a period about 5 years ago where that was really, you know, it came into its own because it was the only high-level language where you had any decent kind of like async primitives, and you could do, you know, you could write code that would deal well with interrupts and long, you know, calls to the database and whatnot. And now there's a whole pile of new languages that serve that function on the back end, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on what you think of JavaScript outside of the browser.
That's another good question. So, yeah, this picks up exactly from where I just was in that history, right? Which is like, so suddenly you had V8, and V8 super fast, and V8 sort of accidentally, because he was really good at math, was like, the whole model was like asynchronous execution of just like get stuff done in the background while I'm processing the main thing. And Ryan Dahl noticed that this was interesting. And he was interested specifically in just like asynchronous programming as an idea. He did not care about JavaScript specifically. In fact, he specifically doesn't like JavaScript very much, which is weird because he's responsible for all of it. Yeah, so he introduced this at, I think, NodeConf EU in like 2009 or something, 2008 maybe. And he was like, I've come up with this amazing asynchronous programming model, and it happens to use JavaScript, so I'm here. And everyone was like, we can do server-side JavaScript, and everybody poured into that. And he was like, that wasn't what I was trying to do.
That's not what I was saying.
That was not supposed to be the important part. Yeah, and so it took off. And server-side JavaScript was really interesting because you had this huge pool of people who had to learn JavaScript anyway because they had to write JavaScript to make the ads go in the browser. And so they all knew this programming language. And they were like, well, I need to write a server-side app, and there's like 8 languages on the server that I could learn, or I could just use the one I already know. And so people poured in from the front end to the back end to do server-side JavaScript. That was where those people came from initially. That was why people were so enthusiastic about it, because front-end developers could be like, oh, cool, I don't have to be stuck on the front end and have to yell at the Java guy to write some server-side code for me. I can just do it and launch it and deploy it, and he'll find out 6 weeks later. Which is totally how NPM gets into the enterprise, by the way. Like the front-end team is like, we built a front-end React in React, and we needed one more API than you had, so we wrote a Node app and we deployed it, and now it's your job.
Wow, I didn't even know that. Very cool. And so you were.
I didn't even answer your question. Your question was about the other options now, the other programming languages.
Well, I guess what do you? You know, it's interesting. Your version of the story had a lot more importance placed on the you know, everybody knowing it aspect, and that's why no one got the uptake. Which, as soon as you said it, I was like, that's obviously true. And my whole story about it was important that it was async is actually just ludicrous. The technical stuff never matters in software. And so that's a big part of my version of the story is answered already. That that's still true now. And where do you see uptake of Node and JavaScript on the back end and JavaScript outside of the web? Like, from your vantage point, where you have all of the analytics on JavaScript ever, where do you see uptake going?
The really big change that happened 3 or 4 years ago was that all of these front-end developers were writing front-end JavaScript, and then they turned up in Node land and started writing server-side JavaScript, and they started writing NPM modules and wrote hundreds of thousands of NPM modules that did all sorts of useful stuff. And it became so useful that they were like, I want this back on the front end again. And they were like, well, we need a way to get the Node modules back off of the server onto the browsers. Isomorphic apps, the worst name. And like in 2014, like NPM Inc. Thought this was a huge problem for us. We were like, the front end people. How do we make the front end people happy? What do we do about this? This is a huge problem, and NPM is going to have to solve it. And NPM didn't have to solve it. They solved it themselves. First, Substack invented this thing called Browserify, which could take any Node module and put it into the browser. And then a bunch of people who were not as enamored of complicated things as Substack invented Webpack, which is like that, but much easier to configure. And so suddenly all of these people who come from the front end and gone to the back end could go back to the front end with all of this fun stuff that they'd built. And suddenly people were writing tremendously complicated front end applications using hundreds of thousands of Node modules. And there are way more front end developers than there are Node developers, right? Like Node as a server-side language is very cool, but it will never be as big as all browsers ever because there's tons of those.
There's a lot of browsers.
Right.
I've got like 6.
Right. So there's all of these people who are writing JavaScript using NPM who don't care about Node on the server at all. They're like, I'm a Ruby developer, I'm a Java developer, I'm a PHP developer, whatever. I need your modules so that I can write stuff in the browser. And that is where 97% of NPM's users live these days. They are people who write stuff for browsers.
And at this point in the history, now we have we've entered into one of the characteristics of the modern state of JavaScript, which is people complaining about their build tools. Because people are no longer just kind of physically downloading .js files and dragging them into the scripts bucket in their web app, which was the old state of affairs.
Right. It's wild. So again, one of the things about having been in computing a while is that I can look at this situation, which is stupid, and be like, this stupid has happened before, so I don't feel so bad about the stupid. All of computing is these layers of hacks that we built on top of each other. So it's like if you accidentally press the wrong key in a Unix terminal, it makes a bell noise, and the reason that it makes a bell noise is because 40 years ago, the printers used to get stuck, and you'd have to ring a bell so you'd know which printer in this room full of noisy printers to go to unstick the paper, and that's why there's a bell character in computers. It's like that, but JavaScript. It's we took all of this JavaScript from the browser, and we wrote it for the server, and we added all of these server-side ideas and concepts and assumptions, assuming that a file system would be there and network access would be there, and then we took all of that code and put it back on the browser where none of that stuff exists, and have to build all of this extra machinery to pretend to be Node while it's running in the browser when actually the JavaScript came from the browser in the first place, and I'm just like, oh God, we should have just written browser JavaScript to begin with. But we didn't. Instead, we took browser-side JavaScript, wrote it for the server, copied it back, transpiled it, added a whole bunch of random shit, and then put it back in the browser where it is big and heavier than it needs to be.
This seems like it'll work.
Right. But that's the wild thing, right? Is that it does work. It works perfectly, and it's the most popular way of building applications for the web.
It has no resemblance to a house of cards.
Right. Exactly.
Standard JavaScript.
So that's a great segue to the current state of JavaScript, which is that people are looking at this situation where we have these bizarre modules not written for browsers that are predominantly being used in browsers, and they're like, well, this is dumb. We should probably, if everyone's writing JavaScript to write in browsers and they're using NPM to assemble it in browsers, why don't we make it JavaScript that can run in browsers natively without having to do all of that Babel transpilation stuff? Which brings us to the state of ES modules, which is that everyone is fighting and no one can agree.
Yeah, it's really kind of jives with some broader state of 2018 stuff. And also you mentioned like all of this crazy the mention of build tools, and you mentioned transpilation, transcompilation. I forget how to pronounce that word. Anyway, all this also reminds me of another big piece of the current state of JavaScript, which is a totally different language, TypeScript, and kind of more broadly the compiled.js family of languages, I guess. I would say that most of the people that I know that are writing JavaScript are considering or using TypeScript as a daily language.
You are not wrong.
What does that actually look like from somebody who knows things? You know.
So we just finished our 2018 survey of all of the NPM's users. We got 33,000 people to tell us what are they doing with JavaScript. And we asked about TypeScript because last year 46% of people said they were using TypeScript. And we were like, that's a lot of people. And what does using mean? Exactly. Like we really should have been more specific with that question, because like I can use this chair, but I'm not making chairs, you know? So we asked, and this year it was, and I'm gonna get my stats wrong because I don't have like my spreadsheet in front of me, it was 62% of people said that they were using TypeScript. But we went into more detail, and we were like, what does that mean exactly? And it turns out 15% of those 62% are, when they say they're using TypeScript, what they mean is basically they're building stuff in Angular. Angular's written in TypeScript. So technically, if you're building something in Angular, you're using TypeScript, but you're not writing TypeScript, you're just writing JavaScript because you didn't want to. But even if you boil it down and you ask within those people, like, do you write TypeScript? Do you write it every day, all the time? Like 26% of NPM users are primarily everyday TypeScript users.
It's just so crazy.
Which means that because there's 11 million NPM users, it's something like 2.5 million TypeScript users, like primarily TypeScript users, which is a great thing about the state of JavaScript, which is that it's not really JavaScript anymore, right?
It's so funny that JavaScript is. So, and just a little bit of backstory about TypeScript for those of you who might not know about this. JavaScript was, I'm going to exaggerate wildly, JavaScript was written in a week-long binge by this guy named Brandon Ike, who he got asked to put some layer of, or he decided to put some layer of interactivity into into one of the very early browsers.
Netscape.
And it was just this very janky tack-on thing to what was a working idea that was basically a way to present documents that you got from the internet. And so, as you might imagine, for something that was written in a week, there were some pieces, some warts, and some jankiness, and some oddball pieces to it, which people have been working around ever since with only a few curse words. And TypeScript is basically just like, you know, if you had 2 weeks, if you had two to 6 weeks. Anyway, so that's much bigger than I would have thought. 62% you said?
Yeah.
That is much bigger than I would have thought, actually.
So there's a thing that I think not a lot of people appreciate about JavaScript, which is that it was built, as you said, it was written in 11 days by Brendan Ike on a deadline. And the best part of that history story, is that when he was writing it, it was called LiveScript. And there was a server-side version of JavaScript at the beginning, also called LiveScript. And it was terrible. And it crashed every 15 seconds, and it was a complete nightmare, and it was so bad that everybody ignored the idea of server-side JavaScript for another 15 years. And the name was changed to JavaScript literally like at the last minute, like the day before launch, because they bought Java from Sun, and they were like, Java applets are the future, and we actually need something that doesn't take 40 seconds to load, so we're gonna get something that isn't a Java applet, and we're just gonna, it's gonna be LiveScript, but we're gonna call it JavaScript, because then it sort of sounds like the two are related, even though they have nothing in common. And that's why it's called JavaScript, because the marketing department thought that would be cool. And so forever now, I have to have slide decks where, like, you know, please give us millions of dollars. Slide 1, Java and JavaScript, not the same.
Oh, you got cursed by Brandon Ike. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, but
or the marketing department. I'm not sure. I guess.
But to actually get to my point and not get sidetracked by stupid history, Because he wrote it in 11 days, one of the side effects of that was it doesn't have a standard library. JavaScript doesn't have like this big pile of functions that most languages come with that sort of give you an idea of what the language is supposed to do, right? Like, you know, Perl is like, I would like you to do text processing. That's what its standard library tells you. And Python is like, I kind of want you to do some math. And Ruby is like, I don't know what Ruby's trying to do, but it's got some kind of idea. I would like you to be inscrutable and write poetry. But Java doesn't have any opinions because JavaScript's like, I don't have a standard library. If you want to do literally anything, then you should download something from NPM because I don't do anything except dates and terribly. Don't use that. Like literally the only thing in JavaScript standard library is dates, which you shouldn't use. So it's like it has no standard library.
That's pretty funny.
But the result of that is because it doesn't have any opinions about where you should use it, people use it everywhere. So 97% of people are using it to do stuff in browsers, but 77% of people are also using it to do stuff on servers, and 46% of people are using it to do apps, like desktop apps or mobile apps. Like 46%, 4.5 million people are using JavaScript to write real software that runs on like phones and actual desktops, not web pages. And another 13%, which I remind you is like still 1.5 million people, are using it to do IoT things, so like robots and stuff. Like actual people who work at NASA have told us that they test spacesuits using this giant apparatus that is itself written in JavaScript. So like NPM tests spacesuits now, and I'm like, that is the joy of no standard library because it can do anything. So it's doing everything.
That's a lot to take in, Lauren. Your job is a spacesuit?
Somebody 2 years promised that they were going to put JavaScript on an actual satellite and launch the satellite into space, and so I was dining out on that for that year, but they didn't do it. I was sad.
Well, somebody's done it. Didn't Planet, isn't Planet a JavaScript? Planet Labs?
I don't know.
If there's JavaScript in space right this second.
If there is JavaScript in space, then I absolutely am going to start taking credit for that, because one day,
I think you should. If I were you, I would 100% take credit for that.
One day, a chunk of metal is going to, you know, hurl out of the sky and kill someone because undefined was not a function. And it will be my fault.
Are you going to want to go to jail for that?
I'll blame Isaac.
Some of our alums work at Planet, so maybe we should take credit for JavaScript being in space.
Absolutely.
State of JavaScript. We are responsible for JavaScript being in space.
Woo!
Way to go. If you work at Hack Reactor, you could just pat yourself on the back. Or NPM. Okay, so and I also wanted to ask you, what about other compile-to-jest languages, Elm or whatever?
They're seeing some traction, but nothing is nearly as big as TypeScript. TypeScript is really gigantic, and I think part of the reason that that's happening is because I haven't finished digging into these specific numbers, but part of the reason is because people from Java find TypeScript sufficiently familiar that they feel comfortable, and Java is the second most popular programming language after JavaScript. So there's this huge pile of Java people who are like, fine, I will come, I'm bored of being doing the same, you know, com.whatever since 1995. Yeah, so companies are really, really investing in JavaScript, and their Java teams are switching over to TypeScript because it's JavaScript where they, you know, can still use an IDE that auto-completes everything for them.
Yeah. People really like autocomplete.
I mean, it's great. When I used to be a Java developer, it was great. I used to like complete whole days of work by just hitting tab incessantly. Just like tab, 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 enter, tab, 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 enter, tab, tab, tab. I've written a text editor.
Okay, so Ash, can I get a quick check on time? How are we doing? I'm right at the end? Oh, geez. Okay, I think maybe we've gone through so many different little bits and bobs here of the state of JavaScript. The front-end frameworks are changing around so fast that we can't, I don't know, I guess we could say a word. What do you think is going to be more popular in 3 years, React, Vue, or some third thing?
At the moment, React has absurd market share. React is used by 65% of people use NPM, and they're doing like mobile apps and desktop apps and stuff in it. Like it is twice as big as any framework has ever been, as far as we can tell.
Whoa, that's a big.
Right, and it's because React is again, like JavaScript itself, React is like, I'm not going to be so picky about where you use me, right? So, because React is in React Native, so people are writing mobile apps and desktop apps. And it's in a whole bunch of places that aren't web apps. And that's part of why it's getting so popular. So I wouldn't bet against React, certainly not right now. The other thing I think that's going to be big, and this is like, you know, self-serving because it's the thing that we're doing now, is security is going to be a big deal in the JavaScript space in the next 3 years, because big companies are only just beginning to realize quite how much JavaScript they're using, right? JavaScript grew 25,000% in 5 years. And like enterprises are not used to reacting to anything, and that happens in 5 years. They're like, if 5 years is sort of like their minimum reaction time to like they're the sloth in that, what is that movie? They're like, oh, JavaScript, and it's like 5 years have passed. Right, and so like I walked into a large bank in New York. I shall not name names. And they said, in this building alone, there are 1,000 people who write nothing but JavaScript all day. And I'm like, what's your security story? And they're like, we were hoping you'd tell us.
Yeah. Do you have something to tell them?
Yes, we are a security company now.
You're a security company?
We bought a security company, and we built it right into the NPM thing, and the new version of NPM Enterprise has security features out the wazoo, which is good, because I spend my day looking at the registry logs, and I see banks downloading critically vulnerable modules, and I'm like, y'all need to stop. You have my money. I want to like call various banks and be like, did you just see what you did?
The state of JavaScript, it's terrifying.
Right. So I think that's going to be the thing. Like this is everyone sort of like very happily like absorbed thousands and thousands of modules and got a ton of stuff done, and now they're like going to be like, oh well, that's good, but it's not like free. Like we're going to have to do some stuff and like professionalize a little bit.
Are you saying we're going to have some work to do?
It's a shame. I hate it when that happens. I was hoping I could just like npm install everything, but it turns out you also have to do some work.
Okay, I want to take at least 1 or 2 audience questions, but first I want to ask if there's anything that we have missed that is of vital importance to the state of JavaScript.
No, you got me to plug, you gave me the opportunity to plug our paid products, so that's fine.
That's cool. I'm glad. Okay, all right, great. So listen, everybody, I'm going to have time to take, how many audience questions do I have time to take right now? 2? 2, 3?
We don't actually have time to take
3! Oh my gosh, Ash said 3. We got time to take 3 questions. You can go stand up at that object right there, or this is a throw mic catch. Thank you.
Wow. He didn't even want to ask a question. He just was like, defend myself.
Hi. My name is Abel. I graduated from Hack Reactor in October. I wanted to know what you think about React hooks, React hooks.
React hooks are a really interesting modification of their model. I think from my perspective, the most interesting part is because they change the way you slice the behavior of your React app. It's possible to use hooks, like to bring in a set of existing hooks as a module itself. So you can like npm install a bunch of useful behavior into your application as a single install without having to change anything else about your app. That's theoretical. Like, you know, Facebook's been using hooks for 6 months because Facebook uses everything at React for 6 months before telling anybody. And the rest of us have only just got our hands on them. So it remains to be seen whether or not like that promise will work. But like the idea that you could use hooks to, you know, take it from 97% of your application is npm installed to 99% of your application is npm installed, and you only write the last 1%. That would be great. So I think that would be interesting.
I'm also into having 99% of the app written for me in advance and secured by NPM Inc. Copyright and trademark.
You're really leaning into the marketing aspect of this. Oh, we killed an audience member.
RIP audience member.
Hey guys, I'm Steven. I'm a Hack Reactor grad from last Friday.
Woo!
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I have a question for...
Last like 4 days of sleep then.
Oh yeah, it's been a dream like these past 3 days. Not getting up at 6. My question is for Lori. You guys were speaking about security. I read about a recent hack where some guy took ownership of an obscure NPM module, and he did something really clever and inserted some code in like undetectably in the minified version of it, and like stole people's Bitcoin wallets. How would you even like combat stuff like that?
That's an excellent question, because the answer is the module in question is called Event Stream, and as a security company, one of the things that you do is you look for patterns, or you look for malicious code, and one of the ways that you can either do that by doing like static analysis of code, like you can try and read the code and figure out what the code is going to do, but that's provably impossible to work. It's called the halting problem, so shouldn't really do it. And one of the more reliable ways of making it work is you do behavioral analysis. You run the code, and you see if, after the code has run, if anything bad has happened. And if something bad has happened, then that's bad code. But that was the thing about this module, is that not only was this module extremely carefully disguised, right? Like the evil payload was hidden in the tests directory, and there was only one line of code at the end of a super long line of minified code that actually read the thing in the test directory and then evaled it and turned it into JavaScript. It was a nightmare. And even if you'd found all of that stuff, it only executed if it looked 2 levels up of the directory and it was running in an app called thisbank.app. So it only ever executed in that specific wallet app. You couldn't find it any other way. So that's terrifying, like it's an undetectable threat. But the way that you defend against that kind of stuff, like that's the first time that's ever happened, and there's 11 million users, and the thing has been around 10 years. Like it's quite hard to do. And the crucial part of what happened there was that, as you said, the attacker managed to get control of a popular module. And the way that he got control of a popular module is he literally volunteered to take care of it. Because Dominic, who maintained that module, is a very prolific open source author who had written hundreds of other modules. And as a result, there are millions of people on the internet who rely on his code every day, and nobody pays him anything. And he has thousands and thousands of pull requests. He has like 8 full-time jobs, and nobody pays him for any of them. And somebody was like, I will take one of your full-time jobs away from you. And he was like, oh, thank God. And he gave it away. Because of course you would. It's a nightmare being an open source author. And that's the problem, right? We can't fix the security. We can't, like, what we can fix is Dominic being so fucking overloaded that he gives away his code without having enough time to check whether or not this person is legit or a hacker. So that's one of the things that NPM wants to do. That's one of the things that other companies are already trying to do. Like Open Collective is trying to make open source more sustainable, and I think they're a pretty interesting model. I think NPM is able to do stuff like that. It can't be the case that billion-dollar companies rely on stuff that somebody is writing in their nights and weekends and don't pay for it. Like, open source is great. Everyone should be able to build stuff for free, but if you are a billion-dollar company, you should pay. And there's no mechanism for that right now, and we should find some way to do that.
Thank you.
Seems compelling. Raise your hand if you would like a microphone just really flung at your skull. Or you can walk up to the mic. 3, 2.
Oh, it's broken.
It really appears not to be working.
It's dead.
Why don't you say your question? I'll repeat it. WebAssembly. I agree.
Thumbs up.
I gave a talk like 5 years ago called HTML and CSS: A Decade Left to Live, thinking that WebAssembly was gonna like do better than it had. It was maybe 3 years ago. Anyway, it was whenever WebAssembly came out for the first time. Just because there's been such crap authoring environments for GUIs in web apps, and it seems weird. Like in every other app development environment, it's a lot easier and more straightforward to build user interfaces and apps, I think, in general. But I've since become convinced by reality that that's probably not going to happen. I don't know. I don't believe that's going to happen anymore.
I mean, as a native web developer, as a developer who grew up building the web, I disagree that web apps are not the easiest way to build a user interface, but I think probably what that really reveals is that whatever thing you grew up on is the thing that you think is the easiest. But WebAssembly is really interesting because it, for the first time, it unlocks JavaScript's stranglehold on the browser. WebAssembly lets anybody compile any language and then run it in the browser, and it's just as fast as the JavaScript is, especially if it's a language like Rust or C that doesn't do garbage collection, or has limited garbage collection stuff. Like garbage collected languages like Java, you have to compile a whole goddamn JVM, and so it is a bit slow yet. But that's really interesting because the question is, do all of these 11 million people, do they write JavaScript because JavaScript's actually a good language? Or do they write JavaScript because JavaScript is the only thing that runs in browsers? And if they suddenly have a choice to run stuff that is not JavaScript, like 26% of them are already writing TypeScript, which is like, please just let me add one thing to JavaScript. So if suddenly you can write Rust or C or all of this other stuff, is anybody going to write JavaScript by choice? It's going to be a really interesting time to find out. From NPM's perspective, I'm talking at the WebAssembly San Francisco meetup next week, like 5 days from now, I think. From NPM's perspective, it's all good because WebAssembly modules can be published as NPM packages and interoperate with NPM packages, and we think that's what's going to happen. We think all of the people who are like, I need the existing 900,000 modules, I just need this one that's also really fast and written in WebAssembly, and we think that's going to happen. We think the registry is going to become full of WebAssembly. And we're really looking forward to that happening. Take any language, any library, and pour it into the existing pool of libraries and build web apps that are faster and polyglot and mind-blowingly interesting. Like the next 5 years are going to be super fun. WebAssembly is going to change a lot of stuff. That's a good question.
It is a good question. You think people are going to call across boundary? Anyway, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Laurie, for coming tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
Keep it going. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Laurie.
If you want to accomplish a goal, there's two things you can attack. One, you can attack the things that you could do in order to accomplish it. And the other thing that I think gets neglected are the obstacles you can take out of the way. I tell people that orienteers don't get lost, but they get temporarily confused. And the difference is that being lost means you don't know where you are and you don't know how to fix it. An orienteer might not know where they are, but they have the tools to fix it. They have the problem-solving skills and experience to iterate through what could have happened and what next steps they should take. So as a developer, I'm learning all these tons and tons of new things, and everything feels so new. But as the weeks and months go by, things feel less new, and I have more and more context. And that was actually a big reason why I was drawn to Galvanize, was because I felt like it was going to give me the best foundation and context for me to keep learning.
I'm Harsh. I was our former CEO at Hack Reactor. Now I run product at Galvanize, which basically means running the education programs at Galvanize, including Hack Reactor, and also now the Galvanize data science program and some of the other offerings that we have. Jordan, you're next. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, I'm Jordan Holmes. I recently graduated from Hack Reactor. I actually got to spend the first 6 weeks of my 12-week program at the previous location on Market Street, and the second 6 weeks here at Galvanize. And then I got the opportunity to come on as a lead hacker in residence, which I believe is the name of that is switching to
Software Engineering Immersive Resident.
that one. So I'm currently doing that.
Cool, thank you. Mary?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Matthews, and I was also in the same cohort as Jordan, so started with the first 6 weeks at the other location than here. So I think we can both speak to what the transition has been like and the experience at both locations. And I'm not a hacker in residence, but in, I guess, the first month or so out in the job search as well. So can speak to that too.
Awesome, thank you. Toby?
Hi, I'm Toby Hoshman. I went through the program a little over a year ago as a student with some of our front row guests here in the Hack Reactor cohort number 83. Since then, I've been hired to be a technical mentor here, and I've been a tech mentor for about 7 or 8 months at this point.
Awesome.
I worked at the old location and the new location.
Great. Al, our fearless leader.
Hi, everybody. I'm the CEO of Galvanize. I started with Galvanize a year ago in January of 2018 and got to meet the Hack Reactor staff, and it's just been a really awesome journey. So really happy to be here. And I have microphone envy because these are like really cool, and I've got the handheld device here. So anyway, pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Al. James?
Hi, good evening. My name is James Van. I'm the Senior Career Services Manager here for Hack Reactor at Galvanize in San Francisco. Al, I'll join you with the microphone envy. We're brothers here together. I originally started out here at Galvanize 2.5 years ago. I've worked with both the data science as well as the software engineering immersives. I'm happy to be here and answer questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. I will take some questions from the audience towards the end, but I'm going to kick it off with a few different areas. One area that I want to kick it off with is talking about the difference between Hack Reactor before the merger and after the merger, both from a student perspective and then a staff perspective. And then the other thing I want to touch on is we just heard about the state of JavaScript in a very technical way. And there's been some changes to the Hack Reactor curriculum, even pre-merger, that has gone through post-merger, that I want Toby to talk about as it relates to the state of JavaScript talk that Lori and Sean just did. So first of all, and I also want to talk a little bit about the motivations for Galvanize in acquiring Hack Reactor to give a little bit of context for the group that eventually set the stage for everything else. So you know what, let's start there. Al, why don't you talk a little bit about why you felt like Hack Reactor was going to be a good fit for Galvanize?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything starts with mission, right? So when I was looking at Galvanize as an opportunity, one of the many things that was amazing, that were amazing to me, was just the mission-driven nature of what we were doing. And Galvanize was, and continues to be, a little bit different than your typical boot camp, where we have really a learning community. So we have, obviously, you're in one of our campuses. We have these campuses that really take the life of an entrepreneur very seriously. And we invite entrepreneurs on our campus. We mix that with large enterprises, right? These large enterprises want to be with the cool kids, because the cool kids are doing all the innovation, learning a lot of new stuff. So as I looked at the mission, it was very important for us to continue to have a very strong mission around changing people's lives. And we had a software engineering immersive. We thought it could be a better immersive. And we also had and continue to have a data science immersive, which I think is the best in the industry. So as we discovered the Hack Reactor opportunity, and I met Sean and Harsh and the co-founders, Marcus and Tony, what they had just really resonated with me and everybody else that was involved in the deal in terms of how serious they were about changing lives, about doing it with quality, being extremely serious and passionate about outcomes. And just culturally, we felt, okay, we can have the best software engineering immersive in the industry, one that's seen as one of the hardest, and also one that's seen with one of the most effective outcomes, and match that with everything else we were doing. So culturally, we were very aligned, and we felt that from a market perspective, it just was a very 1 + 1 = 3 type acquisition, and it's turned out that way. So it was just an incredible alignment of mission with what they can deliver and the people that stood behind it.
Thanks. So you know that kind of starts the story, and right after that is when we went through the planning process of figuring out how we were going to move Hack Reactor from 944 Market, which is right at the edge of the Tenderloin. If you remember, if you're a graduate of Hack Reactor, into this building. and a lot of interesting things came out of it. And I think one of the things that I have heard over time from the staff here is that there were some things that changed, and there were some things that didn't change, and that's what I want to highlight or ask our panelists to talk about a little bit today. So Jordan and Mary, as students, what do you feel like has been different from your experience in those first 6 weeks that you were at 944 Market Street, and your second 6 weeks that you were here at 44 Tehama? Who wants to go first?
Want me to start, Jordan?
All right, go ahead, Mary.
Sure.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention first that you made me think of when you were giving the introduction was about the curriculum change before we even started. And since I've been in the job search, I was actually in a phone screen the other day and talking about my project, and they were like, they're doing that at Hack Reactor now? So I was like, oh, that's why they changed it, and it's working. Like, people are, like, in companies really value the experience we're getting. But in the transition from the last location to here, for our experience, I didn't see any difference in the curriculum from the way we were having lectures to projects and working together. I think the culture is so ingrained and really interestingly passed down from each cohort, because it's set up in a way that you always have seniors and juniors, that everything, even though there was some, I guess, natural transition time with like setting up tables and that kind of thing, it still felt like things moved pretty seamlessly, and it was pretty incredible. I think over just a weekend, the staff had everything set up and moved over here. And then, let's see, besides the curriculum, some things I really appreciated about the move over here was getting to be working every day, not just in the Hack Reactor bubble, which has its great sides because you build strong community, but also getting to be among companies, like using these things we're learning and seeing it in the real world. And that's something that really motivates me and why I wanted to become a software engineer, because I'm really excited about seeing people take business challenges and use technology to solve interesting problems. So you get to, I guess, in the day-to-day life, remember the end goal a little bit better when you're surrounded by people doing that great work. I also, to me, it was really important to get through Hack Reactor, which is one of the most challenging experiences of my life, which was amazing, was to keep like a good, I guess, healthy balance and make sure I was exercising and getting to do all those kind of things. And here there's a shower, so
that's a plus.
I think I was the first to make use of it on like the first day we moved over here. I was very excited about it, so I could do my lunchtime run and then take a quick shower, which we didn't have at the old place.
Nice. You mentioned when you went to employers and they're like, oh, they're doing that over there. Toby, can you tell us a little bit about, so Toby's been a tech mentor and was a student before in the old way of doing the senior version of the program and in the new way and iterating over the new way. So tell us a little bit about what has changed that Mary's phone screen was.
I'd be happy to, Harsh. So the senior portion has primarily been comprised of 2 projects. When I went through the program, we had a project called Greenfield, and then a new project, which was called New Thesis. It was creatively named. We wanted to change what Thesis was. Thesis before I was a student, 2 cohorts before I was a student, was just a big app. And it was 4 people, and they built one big app, and that's what every boot camp was doing back then. And our head of curriculum said, we got to be able to do something different, something better, so let's introduce some system design elements into it. So we started working with a concept called service-oriented architecture. So that blossomed, but it was still a difficult project. It was hard for students to get their heads around. It was really abstract. So we ended up changing the first project of the senior portion, the Greenfield project, into what we call the front-end capstone. And we introduced service-oriented architecture and system design into the front-end capstone. And then we translated that into what we now call system design capstone, which is an iteration on the first project for the second project that deals with scaling things at what we consider web scale. The students are building apps that can handle traffic similar to a high production site like Walmart.com or Amazon. And so that's really impressive, and we're the only boot camp that's doing that. at these industry level, tackling these industry level challenges. And so it really helps to differentiate the students when they're in the job search.
Yeah. James, James has been helping students find jobs here at Galvanize and now at Hack Reactor as well for years. What have you noticed in recent grads conversations or with employers that you talk to about recent grads?
Yeah, so primarily what I've noticed is the level of sophistication that I think is...
Let me interrupt. Al, do you mind sharing your mic with James?
It's my microphone.
And, yeah.
There we go.
Right, Al, you get to keep your mic.
So, yeah, one thing that I've noticed is a level of sophistication that is really impressive, not only to me, just because I hear all of these, final conversations and during the interview prep, but then as graduates, fresh graduates, they go out and interview, and the feedback is immensely positive. How many of you are on LinkedIn? I'm just assuming most of you are on LinkedIn. Okay, cool. Anyone follow LinkedIn economic graph? Okay, you're all going to learn something. After tonight, you're going to go home and check that out. It's a really interesting tool. I share it with my students all the time, but it's LinkedIn obviously sits on a ton of data, and now they've started to realize how to process that data. And so they put out economic reports. They do an annual report, and they also do a monthly report. In that report, technology, specifically JavaScript, is in their top 10 of demand. So number of jobs versus the number of job seekers that are out there. So there's a fair number of people that can sort of hack something together. But what we're hearing from employers is that there aren't a ton of people that come out, especially out of an immersive program, that can really build a scalable, performing application like our students do. So in other words, they run really fast and they can handle a really big workload and a large number of users. So that's kind of next level stuff that a lot of the employers tell us what they're looking for. And so for me, it's great because it helps me then have conversations with employers.
Yeah, and if you're a Hack Reactor grad, you might remember a familiar face named Fred. And old Fred is who came up with this idea. He's a genius. Continues to come up with ideas like this.
Have to give some credit to Tim Mansfield as well.
Tim Mansfield as well.
Oh yeah, Tim Mansfield definitely had his hands in the dough when they were shaping these senior projects.
Awesome. Jordan, I stole your thunder a little bit, or Mary maybe stole a little bit of your thunder. Let me ask you a question about when you're between your junior and senior section. What did change? Mary talked a lot about the curriculum. Much of that was all the same. For her, it was nice having a shower. Yeah. What did you see that changed from before and after?
I would say I probably echo basically everything that Mary said. There are certain small things I think kind of stand out a little bit. I was really stoked throughout the whole Hack Reactor process. Like I was probably one of the last people to leave every day, and then I was still excited to get out of bed and come back to Hack Reactor in the morning. And at the old building, walking home at like 11:30 was a questionable undertaking. So the area is definitely a change. And sort of related to that, I was going through the onboarding for the Hacker in Residence Shepherd position, and one of the how-tos was, I think it was titled, How to Rescue Students from a Broken Elevator. So I'm happy to have that not be an issue anymore.
The old building was old.
Yeah.
It was really old.
Yeah. And then other than that, there was the transition period, which had some bumps, but really wasn't that bumpy. What we sort of got to do was, while they were setting everything up, we got to kind of have our run of the whole building, which was actually really nice. And having access to this building for 6 months after you graduate is really cool. And the fact that I get to run into everybody who, a lot of people from my cohort who just recently graduated and they're working on finding jobs, or some of them have already gotten jobs and they're just coming to hang out and encourage each other. That's really cool, and I did that wasn't the case before the merger. So
cool. And after that raving review of the last building, I must say, we're still trying to find someone to sublease it from us. So if you know anyone that is interested, true story, you can come talk to us to see if they want to take it from us. Let me take some questions from the audience. Maybe something that someone has said has sparked your interest. Maybe you have some questions. We'll hurl the mic at you as well. Perfect, thank you.
So the alumni network is the wrong word, but the alumni community at the old building was pretty strong through the Douglas. Is there any, plan or, inkling about bringing something like that back? It was definitely nice to have sort of a home base where you could come and, meet recent grads, or if you needed to work from the city for a day or something, like you would have a space for that. So.
Yeah, great question. Caroline, our fearless leader here, our GM, can probably speak to more details. Let me kick it off as she walks over here. Essentially, if you're a grad, you can come back. The Douglas essentially got bigger, but not exclusive, only to Hack Reactor grads. That's the difference that changed. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have a follow-up question, maybe?
Oh, just...
What's that? Funtime Choir. I don't know anything about Funtime Choir.
Funtime Choir is happening right now.
Right this second. All right. Caroline, can you speak to that question?
You hit the nail on the head. So the Douglas itself does not exist here, other than the whole building is the Douglas, and alumni are welcome here. There may be a future iteration of an exclusive space, but for right now, it's the whole campus.
Okay, that's a really helpful clarification, because a lot of the communications have, talked about this like 6-month membership, which makes it seem like if you graduated more than 6 months ago, you're not welcome.
Got it. Thank you for that helpful feedback. We must go change that
Yeah, and we should probably change that nationally, not necessarily just in San Francisco.
Right.
There is a 6-month membership, and it's intended to cover, just like for Galvanize graduates, the length of your job search. And that's why we framed it around membership, and so all active grads in their job search, welcome to do their job search from Galvanize and network with our memberships and connect with our broader network. And then at a national level, we'll look at membership for alumni, the entire Hack Reactor alumni community.
Thank you so much for that question. Yes?
Now that Galvanize and Hack Reactor are merged, is there any interaction between the data science and the software engineering immersive sides?
Good question. It depends on the campus. There's no built-in interaction from a curriculum perspective, but the students do get to meet each other. And we're trying to build more and more of that, because we're just now having recent Hack Reactor graduates on these new campuses. And so there's definitely a desire for the two populations to get to know each other. There's also been a lot of talk about perhaps doing projects together, but with FEC and SDC, it makes it a little bit more difficult to have your own kind of thesis style projects that you might be able to grab a different team on. So that got ruled out. But then we got a bunch of pizza here at one point to get the software engineering and data science folks together, and that seemed to be really helpful. Maybe we might do that again, probably, but in terms of curriculum overlap, we're exploring it, but haven't found anything yet. There's different pockets of different campuses that are trying different things, and whichever ones stick or are valuable will likely spread through the rest of the network.
Can I just touch on that? I can just speak to our cohort. We bought pastries, and we lured some of the data science students over with sweets, so that happened.
Nice.
There's been a few social gatherings between the two cohorts. There was a hot cocoa social right after we first moved in here as well. We are trying to find a way to get the two cohorts to have projects together, some way to interlock the curriculum, like Harsh said. Haven't found the right fit yet, but I think in time it probably will happen.
James?
And I would also add, so unofficially, there are, little pairings and projects that are happening, sort of underneath the scenes. I just had a conversation today where two recent graduates, one from the software side, is going to partner with someone from the DSI side to help the DSI student help visualize their final capstone project. They're very data-driven, right? And she is going to help sort of beautify that. And that's also aligned with her own career goals. She wants to get into a position where she works on front end and visualization with the data team. So it's sort of like a win-win for both sides. So I encourage more of that sort of, and I'm happy to help out.
Other questions? Another one, yes.
So as someone who went through the new thesis over a year ago, how have the job placement numbers changed between then and now? Because there have been some really radical changes to the curriculum.
Great question. So let me speak to why the curriculum changes happened in the first place. We had a time where it was taking graduates longer than 6 months to get jobs, and we were trying to figure out exactly why. And so about a year, about a year ago now is when we embarked on this journey of figuring out what's going on. Why is it taking graduates longer to get jobs? And we learned that companies really were shifting towards wanting to see a lot more competency around actual production grade applications in the interview process, not just when they get onboarded, but in the interview process. And so we made that change, and immediately we started seeing leading indicators from the first few cohorts that had graduated, where their career coaches, when we track how long does it take a graduate to get a phone screen, and then from the phone screen, how long does it take the graduate to get an on-site, and from the on-site to an offer. And the leading indicators of how many graduates were getting phone screens from their changed resumes was drastically different. And then a couple months went by and we started seeing going from phone screen to on-site, the rate was also increased. And now, in about a month-ish, is when the next CIRR stats report comes out that actually has graduates from the time that they did FEC and SDC. It's greater than a 10% increase from the previous report, and we already know 6 months later what that change is, and that in addition to that 10% is about another 8% increase. All that stuff will get published soon, so you can dig through it yourself. But all the leading indicators were very positive, and now the placement numbers were also very positive. So we decided to keep doing FEC and SDC. There's actually a couple more things in the works that Toby can speak to but with the disclaimer of these may or may not happen, because we're always trying to iterate and get better when we learn things. So.
Well, I think it goes more along the line of what Laurie was talking about earlier and how JavaScript's changing and people are adapting to TypeScript. And there's something else that didn't come up earlier with Laurie and Sean called GraphQL, which is making waves in 2019, is looking to be pretty popular. So we're always looking at the industry and what are job descriptions saying? What skills are people looking for? So we're always trying to find and move and shape the curriculum to match the expectation of the hiring managers and these technical teams that are hiring our graduates. So nothing's official, but there are rumors that maybe some GraphQL stuff is going to make its way into curriculum, which I'm very excited about because I'm a huge fanboy of GraphQL. We're focusing on security as well. There's an authentication sprint that talks about those kind of things, and we're always looking to add and change things like that as well. This last cohort was the first one that GraphQL became an actual advanced requirement on one of our sprints. So it's technically in the curriculum, but in a hard-to-reach place.
Nightmare mode?
It's a nightmare mode.
Cool. Any other questions? Yes. Can we pass or toss the mic over?
So I'm running into kind of an issue in my role where I want my team to grow, and it just seems like that's not going to happen in the Bay Area because engineers just cost too much. I'm curious whether you're seeing a difference in outcomes in the Bay Area versus other campuses, and like kind of how you think the kind of future of jobs might kind of depend on kind of cost of living within the Bay Area versus other places.
That's a great question. I fortunately get a lot of insight into not just San Francisco, but other campuses too in my role. So I feel surprisingly pretty qualified to answer that. The remote program in particular has really high placement rates. Actually, the remote program has, depending on the reporting period, but most consistently the highest placement rates out of any of the campuses, everywhere, including San Francisco, New York, everywhere. So I think that companies, as they struggle to find more and more talent in San Francisco, and as tools for remote pair programming or communication get better and better, a lot more companies are going to hire people remotely. We're seeing that from the remote team already, where graduates can apply to jobs anywhere, and the benefit that the graduates have is they've been learning JavaScript in a remote setting. They've already been pair programming for 3 months, all day, every day with someone else. And so when they walk into an interview, what we're seeing happen is they're educating the company on, oh yeah, I don't actually need to be somewhere in person to do this stuff, and some companies are picking up on it. So frankly, I'm surprised that there continues to be a developer shortage in San Francisco, which is what raises the average starting salary of software engineers. But it keeps happening. More and more companies want to hire more and more engineers, and that just keeps going year after year. And as a founder of a code school, that I would never have predicted that 6 years ago. Never. I would have been like, oh yeah, we're going to train enough engineers in a couple years, and I don't know what we're going to do then. But year after year, the job market just grows in terms of demand. And even with more and more code schools training folks, I think the differentiator, I think it was James who mentioned it, but, or no, maybe it was Lori, but there's a bunch of people who can write JavaScript, and then there's a bunch of people who can write JavaScript well in a scalable production level application. And I think as a school, we just want to keep making sure that graduates are at that top tier where employers interview them and want to keep hiring them, even if there are more and more graduates graduating from other code schools. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
So you're looking to hire people?
No.
I just wanted to clarify that.
I'm looking for headcount and can't get it, and it makes me want to quit my job because I get offers to get paid more at other places, and I just it seems like I'm stuck where engineers in the Bay Area are overpaid and coddled, and that's why I became one, and that's why I'm never gonna get anyone on my team. But
We might have some people for you, I'm just saying.
Other questions? How are we doing on time? I think we... Okay. Going once before I go back to the panel with some questions of my own. Lori, get ready to catch.
Oh. This is totally just a numbers question because I always want to know about numbers. How many total Hack Reactor graduates are there, like ever?
That is a great question. I have an approximation. I don't have the exact number live to this date. It's over 5,000.
Nice.
It's insane. I mean, and you've been lecturing at Hack Reactor for years and years and years now. I think I asked you earlier today, 22 times to be exact. And the community just keeps growing, and people keep, if you're in the alumni channel, you'll just notice people saying, hey, my company's looking for more engineers. That's probably the most popular type of post in the general channel. Any other questions? Cool. I want to ask a couple more questions for Mary and Jordan, who experienced Hack Reactor pre-Galvanize and post-Galvanize. You mentioned that the curriculum, all that stuff is pretty much the same. What about the culture of the student body? What are some things culturally that are different? Does it feel very different? And if so, in what ways does it feel better? What ways does that culture feel perhaps worse? What did you notice between the two campuses?
This isn't really answering your question because I just think it's almost hard to compare from the first half to the second half, because in the beginning we're working every day with a pair programming, and so that's one type of group culture. Mm-hmm. And then in the second half you're working in a team. But I'm not sure if it's just the nature of being in the program longer, but I feel like obviously I knew people better in the second half. And I almost feel like we got to know the other cohort better in the second half. And I'm not sure if that's just because it was the second half. But maybe also the nature of working here after graduating, because we're sitting around not just with our cohort, but the other cohorts. And so I feel like I almost start to forget who was actually in 105 with us versus the other one, which has been really nice in the job search, just like sharing information and asking each other questions and just feeling support from your community.
Cool. Jordan?
Yeah, I think that from probably like the first day at Hack Reactor, or maybe it was one of the first 3 days at some point, Liz Penny asked the audience if anybody had any sort of feedback or thoughts about the first week, and the thing that I raised my hand and said was I was consistently impressed with the passion and excitement of all of the staff members at Hack Reactor. And I would say that has consistently been a really, really exciting part of being at Hack Reactor. And we just did sort of for the hackers in residence, the passing of the torch. So some of the hackers in residence who were in those positions for our cohort just finished their residence, and a lot of them already have job offers or are going straight into jobs. But we had a little ceremony, and they were all asked for one piece of feedback and what the best part of being a hacker in residence was. And I think every single person said like the relationships that they made with everybody working at Hack Reactor and all of the other hackers in residence. So yeah, for me, the culture is probably maybe the most exciting part. Obviously, that wasn't the reason I came to Hack Reactor, and I love the tech, but the culture is the reason I'm doing the hacker in residence experience, and I'm just consistently impressed by it, and that has remained constant from being on Market Street to being here at Galvanize. So, yeah.
Cool. Toby, you look like you had a...
Yeah, as an instructor and as someone who's had a couple of cohorts now in this space, I have some interesting insight into what Mary was saying about the cohorts being closer. And you weren't able to disambiguate whether that was just the senior portion or if that was really a thing about the space. And I can tell you it's absolutely a thing about the space. At the old location, we had a junior and senior cohort on each floor. We had 2 different floors for our students. So seniors and juniors kind of got together, but you didn't really know your other cohorts. So the seniors didn't really know each other well. Now they work directly next to each other. And so the cohort that just graduated last Friday, congratulations, it was the 107s and the 108s, and they made a nickname calling them the 215s because they felt so close that they added the numbers together. And once we took away the group projects and we had a couple of solo projects, people would start sitting on the other sides of the room and they would start mixing up. There's absolutely a more closeness between the seniors and the juniors independently. So unfortunately, that's kind of put a bit of divide between the juniors and the seniors, and we've noticed that. We've gotten feedback about that. So we're starting to introduce some more areas where we can cross the seniors over to give direct mentorship to the juniors with whiteboarding exercises and code reviews and things like that. So we're trying to make sure that even though the seniors are closer, they don't become further away from the juniors, because that mentorship is very important to the culture that we have at Hack Reactor.
Yep. And actually, that reminded me of a little tidbit you told me before, or a couple days ago. What happened to the chimes? Because, you know.
At the old space, whenever there was a lecture, there was this beautiful voice that would come over the intercom system we had there. They'd go, 5 minutes, everyone? 5 minutes. Here at Galvanize, we don't have that. But the best part was right at the beginning of lecture, as soon as the second hand hit the 12 mark, there was this really gentle gong that would ring out. And so as soon as we moved this cohort right here over, the very first time we had a kickoff, I was watching my watch, and I watched the second hand go up, and then I counted on 5, 4, 3, 2, and then all of a sudden, in unison, they went gong. And so it's kind of like moving spaces created a new tradition, and is actually creating new culture here in the space as well. And that's now carried over to another cohort, the one that I graduated last Friday,
the same thing.
who never heard the original gong, but they still do the gong thing at my beck and call, which is fantastic. It's just like JavaScript. You don't choose to do it, you just have to do it.
All right, I'm gonna, any last questions from the audience? Cool. I'm going to hand it back over to Caroline. Thank you for the insightful questions, specifically about the alumni experience. We'll definitely go make some changes about that. Make sure everyone knows what the deal is. Caroline, over to you. Let's give a big round of applause to our panelists.
Keep it going. Thank you, Harsh and Jordan and Mary and Toby and Al and James. I want to introduce a few more people in the room that are here. If you have any additional questions about the program, there's Rebecca Faris. She is our program lead. She runs Hack Reactor in San Francisco. Badass, amazing individual, worth getting to know if you don't already. Andrew Casada is our enrollment officer. If you are here because you're interested in attending Hack Reactor, he has a lot of answers to your questions. And wait, I'm spotting. Okay, that's it. Any additional questions for this panel? All right, we're a wrap. Thank you so much for coming. Wait, there's a question. No dumb questions.
Considering making a mascot.
I can answer that. Darwin, Fred is our mascot. Repeat the question. Is Hack Reactor thinking about getting a mascot? For the graduates here, they know that Fred is the mascot of Hack Reactor. The beautiful man who wears all black and delivers all of your lectures has and forever will be the mascot of Hack Reactor.
And the forever meme of Hack Reactor.
That is a great question
That is an awesome
that I have not heard.
Ah, like the Cougars or
Oh my God.
So we need like sports team is what I'm hearing you say.
Can I just say, our cohort had a mascot, the 105s. Banana was our mascot. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly. Is there any traction around banana? Can I get a show of hands for banana? Okay. Fair enough. Okay. We're a wrap, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.